everyone. The topic for today's lecture has been titled as Tung Meng Hui. It is called the mother of all political organization in China. This lecture I have divided into three parts. In the first part, I'm going to talk about the background that led to the establishment of this organization. In the second part, I'm going to talk about the activities of Tung Meng Hui. And in the third part, I'm going to talk about how its role led to the formation of the Republic of 1911 and how gradually it transformed itself into the political party known as the Kuomintang. After suffering defeat in the hands of the foreign powers, namely Great Britain, in the First Opium War from 1840 to 42, the Qing court decided that it is going to contain foreign intrusion into China. Efforts to adjust and reform the methods of governance were very difficult because of the conservative nature of the court culture, in which the Manchus insisted that the majority Han Chinese won't be given much power. And so, many a time, it was seen to be struggling to deal with the various rebellions, like the Taiping rebellion from 1851 to 64, the Lian rebellion from 1851 to 68, the Muslim rebellion of Yunnan, and the Northwestern Tribal Rebellion. The traditional armies of the Qings proved to be very incompetent, and so gradually the Qing started to rely on the Han Chinese army. Following the defeat of the Second Opium War from 1856 to 1860, the Qing tried to modernize their method of administration as well as the army through what is known as the self-strengthening movement, which started from 1861. In 1895, China suffered a series of defeats in the hands of Japan in the First Sino-Japanese War. This demonstrated that traditional Chinese feudal society also needed to be modernized if the technologies and commercial advancements were to succeed. In the last years of the 19th century, the scramble for concessions among the foreign powers reached fevered pitch. Anxiously eyeing one another's territories, Britain, France, America, and Russia strove to contain Japan's appetite for Chinese territory. The concessions now in demand were commercial as well as territorial and included mining rights, transport system, and industrial ventures, any of which might become a nucleus of territoriality as well as a source of income. Anti-Qing movement or sentiment was always present in the Han Chinese psyche throughout their 268 years rule. Chinese thinkers in the early Qing period had promoted anti-Qing and revive Ming idea, which did not result in the overthrow of the Qing rule, but it produced the germ of future revolution, and this feeling was kept alive by different underground and secret societies that operated throughout China. The various Ming loyalists movement like the revolt of the three feudatories, the activities of the Heaven and Earth Society, the White Lotus Rebellion, and finally the Taiping Rebellion demonstrate the unending thread of nationalistic and anti-racial protest. The great revolutions of the West, like the Glorious Revolution of England, the War of Independence in America, and the French Revolution, all exerted a profound influence in the minds of the Chinese people. Moreover, the success of the national unification movement in Italy and Germany served as shining examples for forward-looking Chinese, promoting them to take similar action at home. Nationalism and republicanism, along with democracy, now became the motivating forces for revolutionary changes in China. A corollary of all this was the strong feeling of xenophobia. Anti-foreign sentiment were periodically expressed by officials and peasants throughout the 19th century. In the first decade of the 20th century, there were direct attacks on foreign trade and commerce. In 1905, the Chinese merchants and traders organized a boycott movement against the Americans because they protested against the American immigration law, which was highly discriminatory. Students and large number of ordinary people joined this anti-American movement. An essential feature of this political boycott was Chinese were now protesting not merely the loss of economic privileges, but were expressing a self-consciousness and a national loyalty, which was never seen before. In 1908, a similar boycott of Japanese goods took place, and it came to be known as the Tatsumaru incident. Apparently, the Japanese ship Tatsumaru was caught by the Chinese for carrying contraband substances. The Japanese protested vehemently and claimed an apology and compensation. This outraged the Chinese, and a boycott was organized. Merchants burned their stocks of Chinese goods, and dock workers refused to unload the Japanese ships. The anti-imperialist, anti-feudal Chinese bourgeois democratic revolution was actually started by Dr. Sun Yat-Sen. Sun Yat-Sen from 1866 to 1925 was born into a peasant family in a village in a Guangdong province near Canton. As a teenager, he went to Honolulu, where he received a Western education. After he returned to China in 1885, he studied medicine in Guangzhou and Hong Kong and began to practice in Macau and Guangzhou. During this period, he got to know of some patriotic young men and secret society members who met regularly to discuss about anti-Manchu or anti-Qing activities and how the Qing rule was very, very oppressive in character. He had a strong admiration for the Taiping rebellion and called himself as the Hong Xiaokuang II. He was also influenced by the reformist thinking. When the Sino-Japanese War broke out, he realized that the crisis facing the country is very grave, and also thought that under the Qing rule, it was almost impossible for China to become rich and powerful. The only way to solve this problem was to overthrow the Qing rule and establish a constitutional democracy or a republic in China. In November 1894, Dr. Sun Yat-sen assembled many Chinese living in Honolulu to establish the Xingzhou Hui, or the Society for Revival of China, the first bourgeois revolutionary organization. In the summer of 1894, Sun and his companion called Lu Hao-tung went north to see the state of affairs in the capital of Peking. They came back deeply disappointed by observing the utter decadence of the Qing court. In 1895, he returned to Hong Kong and called together his comrades to establish a headquarter or a general headquarter of the Xingzhou Hui. The Xingzhou Hui put forward in clear and definite terms the revolutionary aim of establishing a government of the people. Immediately after it was established, it planned for an armed uprising in Guangzhou in 1895, but the plan was leaked and it was crushed even before it began. Lu Tao-tung, he even organized a blue sky, white sun flag for the revolutionaries, and he became the first martyr of the revolution. Sun fled abroad after the Qing court ordered his arrest. He went to Japan, Europe, and lastly to America, where he came into contact with many bourgeois revolutionary organizations and started planning for another armed insurrection. Under him, the Xingzhou Hui staged uprising in Wuchang, Guangdong, and it had a growing number of army of more than 20,000 who started defeating the Qing army. But after some time, this rebellion ran out of ammunition and gradually the rebellion was defeated. But Sun Yat-Sen did not lose hope, and he persevered in the revolutionary struggle, continuing to seek the path of national salvation. In 1897, he developed the idea of a social revolution to complement his earlier nationalist and democratic revolution. Here was the basis of his famous three people's principles, or which include people's national consciousness or nationalism, people's right or democracy, and people's livelihood or socialism, which profoundly and something which very, very much not only influenced Sun Yat-Sen, but he proudly called itself this program as Lincolnian expression of the people, by the people, and for the people. The three people's principle became the revolutionary philosophy for Sun Yat-Sen and his followers. The first principle, nationalism, called not only for the overthrow of the Qing rule and the establishment of a constitutional, the establishment of a democracy, but also called for the removal of foreign imperialist yoke from China. The second principle of democracy aimed at achieving the four rights of the people, that is, initiative, referendum, election, and recall, and the five powers for the government, that is, the executive, legislature, judiciary, control or supervisory, and examination. The last two reflecting the traditional functions of the censorate and the civil service examination. The third principle of socialism stressed for the regulation of capital and equalizing land. Here we see traces of Chinese utopian idea of land for the tillers, as well as the influence of the Taiping social revolution. During this time, the bourgeois revolutionary groups were spreading democratic revolutionary ideas, and new revolutionary organizations were formed throughout China. In 1904, for example, the Huangzai, together with Chiang Tuakan, Song Xiaren, and others, set up the Hua Sing Hui, or Society for the Revival of the Chinese Nation, in Changsha. Zhang Taifan, Tao Chengzhang, and others organized the Guangfu Hui, or the Restoration Society, in Shanghai. Revolutionary youth in Hubei also established the Science Study Group. All these groups organized armed uprising and struggle, but none were successful. To add to the frustration, there was the hostile influence of the Emperor Protection Society, or the Pao Huangtang, under the leadership of Kang Haowei and Liang Ti-Chao. They fled to Japan after the failure of the 100 Days Reform. They and their followers vehemently attacked the ideas of revolution and republicanism. The Xingzhou Hui was still carrying out activities abroad under the leadership of Sun Yat-sen, developing organizations among overseas Chinese, advocating revolution and waging a struggle against the reformists like Kang Haowei and Liang Ti-Chao. In 1904, Sun Yat-sen published a pamphlet called A Message to My Compatriots, where he exposed the true nature of Liang Ti-Chao's pseudo-revolution and his actual wish to protect the emperor, pointing out that revolution and protection of the emperor cannot go together, and they are two different courses which are mutually exclusive and repulsing the reformist onslaught. In another pamphlet titled The True Solution of the Chinese Question, he also made the following points: that the Qing rule is steadily approaching its doom, China is now on the eve of a great national movement, The time is now ripe for a nationwide revolution, and once our great aim of transforming China is achieved, not only will the dawn of a new age appear in our beautiful country, but the whole of mankind will attain through shared prosperity of a more glorious future. Let us pause for a quiz. Who propounded the three people's principles? Option 1, Huang Xing. Option 2, Lu Haotung. Option 3, Sun Yat-Sen. And option 4, Kang Ho-wei. The answer is option 3, Sun Yat-Sen. Let me now turn to the second part of my lecture, which is how the T'ung Meng Hui was set up. The rapid development of revolutionary situation required a very strong national political party to lead the revolution. At this point, Sun Yat-sen and Huang Xiu amalgamated part of the membership of the Xingzhou Hui with all the other revolutionary bodies to form the Tung Meng Hui, or the Chinese Revolutionary League, in Tokyo in August 1905. It elected Sun Yat-sen as the president, set up an executive group, and adopted a program proposed by Sun Yat-sen, that is, to drive out the Qing, restore China, establish a republic, and equalize land ownership. This program was spelled out by Sun Yat-sen in the manifesto written by Sun Yat-sen for the first issue of T'ung Meng Hui's mouthpiece or journal, the Minbao, or the People's Journal, as the three people's principles of the principle of nationalism, the principle of democracy, and the principle of people's livelihood. The three people's principle was a political program which embodied the hopes of the Chinese bourgeois for the establishment of a republic and the development of capitalism, and was a great rallying cry for the revolution at that time. Sun Yat-sen's three people's principle were accepted as the revolutionary philosophy of the T'ung Meng Hui, although the majority of the members focused only on the first two principles, that is, people's nationalism and people's democracy. This was because the China Revival Society and the Restoration Society, both of which emphasized the overthrow of the Qings and the establishment of the Republic, contributed as the most of the members, and the original members or Sun Yat-sen's direct followers were less in number. Huan Xing now emerged as one of the major leaders of the T'ung Meng Hui and a strong man of the party, and his name was often appeared alongside that of Sun Yat-sen as a co-leader. The membership of T'ung Meng Hui grew rapidly to 963 in 1906, as of whom 863 joined in Japan, the rest coming from Europe, Hawaii, Hong Kong, and Malaya. Branches were established in China as well as in key overseas communities. Sun Yat-sen walked out a detailed path of the revolution. He said initially there would be a military rule of 3 years in the areas liberated by the revolutionary forces. During the period of the military government, it would control all military as well as civil affairs at the district or the CN level. Meanwhile, it would cooperate with the local people to eliminate the old political practices and evil practices such as slavery, foot binding, opium smoking, and bureaucratic corruption. The second stage would be a period of political tutelage lasting a period of 6 years, during which time local self-government would be initiated and popular elections for local assemblies and administrations would be held. However, the military government would still retain the control of the central government. During this period, there would be provisional constitution to specify the rights and duties of the military government and the ordinary people. When the period of the tutelage will end, the military government would be dissolved and the country would be governed by a new constitution. In short, Sun Yat-Sen envisaged a three-stage revolution to lead the country towards constitutionalism. The founding of the T'ung Meng Hui and the formation of this program indicated that the Chinese democratic revolutionary movement had entered a new stage. However, this program did not raise in clear and definite terms anti-imperialist slogan or anti-feudal struggle, and also it did not specify what exactly Sun Yat-sen had talked about land ownership of the people. The activities of the group had two main aspects: debates with reformists on political ideology and the development of series of armed uprisings. The reformists, on the other hand, headed by Kang Ho-wei and Liang Ti-Chao, and with their journal Sin Min Gongbago, or the New People's Journal, published in Japan, which was their fortress, they praised constitutional monarchy and they vilified the revolution. They said it was not necessary to overthrow the Qing rule to make China rich and powerful, and it would be enough to persuade it to reform and demand the practice to form a constitutional monarchy. They attacked armed revolution, claiming that it would lead to anarchy and intestine war and the partitioning of the country by foreign powers, and that it was not an expression of patriotism but an invitation for the disaster of the country. With Min Bao, or the People's Journal, as their mouthpiece, the revolutionaries under Sun Yat-sen pointed out to the contrary that the court had not the slightest of intention of renouncing its position and would function as a constitutional monarchy at all. They also pointed out that the court had already become a puppet to the imperialists, and unless the traitorous government was overthrown, China would not be totally free of corruption, and China would never move towards democracy. They considered that the patriotism parodied by the reformists were in fact love for the traitorous Qing government, which acted as the foreigner's slave, and that the reformist support for the monarchy and opposition to the republic was a criminal act against the people of China. This great debate fully exposed the reformist pro-Qing stance and the opposition to revolution. By their defeat of the reformists on the theoretical front, the revolutionists took over the ideological leadership, winning over the side of the people and the revolutionary atmosphere at that time. The social base and the potential operations of the T'ung Meng Hui had been substantially enlarged. T'ung Meng Hui was multi-provisional and multi-class as compared to the predominantly Cantonese makeup of earlier such political organization, which were capable of instigating uprising only in the coastal region. Above all, T'ung Meng Hui unified a central organization that resembled a modern political party, which served as a rallying point for all revolutionary and progressive forces which were at work in China, as much as it fittingly received the tribute as the mother of the Chinese Revolution. The first armed uprising of the T'ung Meng Hui was staged in 1906, which was led by the T'ung Meng Hui of peasants and miners in the areas around the Hunan province. Members of the T'ung Meng Hui were active in this uprising, spreading revolutionary ideas and messages, having concrete political program, and they tried to rally the masses to take up armed struggle. The troops of the uprising quickly grew to about 30,000 men and rapidly started gaining control over 4 to 5 counties, defeating the Qing army time after time. Only after the court was reinforced with new army from other provinces that it was finally able to crush this uprising. From 1906 to 1908, the T'ung Meng Hui launched as many as 6 uprisings in succession in Guangdao, Guangxi, and Hunan province. Sun Yat-Sen personally fought in the Guangxi province uprising. Zhu Ziling, the member of the Guangfui Hui and the revolutionary Qing, were others who also staged uprising. The last revolutionary attempt was made in April 1911, which aimed at capturing the important provincial capital of Canton, which created a sensation and a shock wave in the Qing court that it presaged the success of the next successful attempt at Wuchang, which happened half a year later. This 10th failure produced the famous 72 martyrs, many of whom were students who had returned from Japan. They were later buried at the Yellow Flower Mound in the northern suburb of Canton. Because of the weakness in their mass base and the purely military adventurous tactic of the surprise attack that the T'ung Meng Hui adopted, usually it ended in defeat. However, each delivered a major blow to the Qing rule. The selfless heroism of the revolutionaries aroused widespread mass sentiments and resistance and inspired many more people to join the anti-Qing campaign. Now let us turn to another quiz. The T'ung Meng Hui was established in option 1, Tokyo, option 2, Hong Kong, option 3, Hanoi, or option 4, London. The answer is option 1, Tokyo. Now I have come to the concluding part of this presentation, that how the T'ung Meng Hui ultimately was successful. The 10 unsuccessful attempts at revolution all took place in the south and southwest region of China, which were very, very close to Hong Kong and Hanoi, which offered greater freedom of plotting and organizing. However, powerful elements within the T'ung Meng Hui now advocated to skip this peripheral region and approach towards the main heartland of China, that is central China of the Yangtze region. Thus, on 13th July 1911, Central China Bureau of the T'ung Meng Hui was established in Shanghai with Zhang Qiaozhen as the leader. The central provinces of Hunan and Hubei emerged as the prime target. All these led to the Wuchang uprising. The Wuchang uprising actually broke out on 10th October 1911. The driving force behind it was two T'ung Meng Hui associates or associations, the Literary Association and the March Together League, which had been carrying out revolutionary propaganda and organization work in the Hubei New Army and secret societies for some time, drawing into organizations of more than 5,000 officers and soldiers, which were approximately 1/3 of the provisional army. Encouraged by the armed uprising which developed out of the railway rights protection movement in Sichuan, they decided to stage an armed uprising on October 11th. But due to an accidental explosion which took place on 9th October, which alerted the authorities, the plan for the uprising was discovered and the uprising and the headquarters were raided. A large number of revolutionaries were arrested and executed by Liu Chuang, the Governor General of Hubei and Hunan. The revolutionaries in the new army, seeing that the situation was critical, at the same time ripe to strike ahead, went with the planned uprising, but instead of 11th, they staged the uprising on 10th October 1911, and this started the Wuchang uprising. Wuchang was occupied after one night's fighting. On the 12th, the revolutionaries also occupied Hangyang and Hankow, the two towns which make up the city of Wuhan. The victory of the Wuchang uprising quickly aroused a high tide of revolutionary enthusiasm throughout the whole countries. Revolutionaries launched new army and secret society uprising in every province and spontaneous struggles by peasants, workers, artisans, and the urban poor who all participated in this armed uprising. By the end of November, 14 provinces had been declared as independent from the Qing control, and the disintegration of the Qing rule was under its way. A provisional revolutionary army government was established, electing Huang Xiang generalissimo and Li Huanhang as vice generalissimo of the new army. However, both denied the appointments because at that time Sun Yat-Sen was still to return from abroad. During the Wuchang uprising, Sun Yat-Sen was traveling in Denver, Colorado, and he learned of the success of the Wuchang Revolution from a local newspaper. His first thought was to rush home as fast as he could and to have personal satisfaction of directing the revolution, but his better judgment dictated that he engaged in diplomacy instead. Knowing that British support was essential for the future of the revolution, he traveled east to New York, from whence he sailed to London. Successfully, he committed the British government to stop all loan negotiations with the Qing government and to prevent Japan from aiding the Peking regime, and also to lift the ban on entering British territories and possessions so that he could return freely to China. With these accomplishments, which were diplomatic success, Sun Yat-Sen went to France, where he was warmly greeted by the Premier Clemenceau and the French people. He came back to Shanghai on December 25th, and Sun Yat-Sen was declared 4 days later by a unanimous vote of the provincial delegates to be the provincial president of the new Republic of China. Li Huanhang became the provisional vice president and Huang Xing the minister of war. The new government adopted the solar calendar in place of the lunar one and designated 1st January 1912 as the first day of the new republic. After some 27 years of struggle, Sun Yat-sen's dream came to a glorious fulfillment. With the rapid disintegration of the Qing, the imperialist powers then sought a puppet. Their choice now fell upon Yuan Shih Kai, a representative of landlord and comprador forces, and they put pressure on the Qing court to appoint him in an important position. Finally, he first was appointed as the Governor General of Hubei and Hunan, and later on he became the Premier of the Qing court. After he had gathered the military and political powers in his hand, Yuan Shih Kai dispatched troops to attack the revolutionary army at Wuhan. The imperialist powers started supporting Yuan Shih Kai, helping to engineer negotiations between the North and the South revolutionaries. When peace talk began in Shanghai on December 18th, the British, American, Russian, Japanese, French, and the German consuls presented a note to both sides urging them to restore all differentiations and come to a peaceful solution. The constitutionalists who had infiltrated amongst the revolutionaries gave support to Yuan Shih Kai and actively gave pressure to the revolutionaries, creating an atmosphere of compromise and ultimately destroying the revolution that Sun Yat-sen had done. Soon after the revolution, the political groups had organized themselves into something like political parties so that they can stand for parliamentary elections. Lian Ti-Chao had organized the former reformers into the Democratic Party, which later was amalgamated into the Progressive Party. The members of the T'ung Meng Hui formed themselves into a political party called the Kuomintang and posed the most serious challenge to Yuan Shih Kai. This party had been formed by Shang Xiaoren, an associate of Sun Yat-Sen. In 1913, in the first parliamentary elections in the Republic of China, the Kuomintang was easily the most successful of all the parties. But very soon, Yuan Shih Kai started cracking them down, and not only that, he staged an assassination of Song Xiaoren. After that, the revolution was very quickly suppressed, and Sun Yat-sen and others once again fled to Japan to work out their future strategies. The last vestiges of any resistance by the revolutionaries was over by this time. By the end of 1913, Yuan abrogated all powers to himself and became almost like a dictator, but still a president in name. What we can see is that the republic was very weak from its foundations. The social forces that brought about this revolution, that is the gentry and the army, had little to offer in the long run. The revolutionary intellectuals were ineffectual, and most significantly, the Chinese people, the bulk, that is the peasantry, were largely ignored. It was essentially a struggle amongst the dominant social groups for power, and that is why it failed to basically unify all the people. Now let us come to the last quiz. The 1911 revolution was possible because of number 1, the Wuchang rebellion, number 2, the formation of the Kuomintang, number 3, Yuan Shih Kai becoming the premier, and number 4, all of the above. The answer is number 1, Wuchang rebellion. Now let us sum up what we have done. After the failure in the First and the Second Opium War, the Qing government tried to make itself into a modernized entity, but it failed to satisfy the people. The presence of the foreign powers and the continuous exploitation of the Chinese economy and resources weakened the Qing position. Already from their very start, the Qing rule had always faced an underground Ming loyalist resistance through secret societies and underground movement. Now they started playing a great role. There were two groups in China at that time, the revolutionaries who wanted to overthrow the Qing rule and establish a republic, and the other were the reformists who wanted to modernize the Qing rule and establish a constitutional monarchy. Now, the former, that is the revolutionaries, were led by Dr. Sun Yat-Sen, and the reformists were led by Lian Ti-Chao. There were many such organizations, and all these were amalgamated by Sun Yat-Sen under the Tung Meng Hui. And after many struggles and armed struggles, they staged a huge revolution known as the Wuchang Rebellion and established in 1912, 1st January, the First Republic of China. However, the Qing court appointed Premier Yuan Shih Kai, who forced the kings to abdicate in favor of the republic, and after that he betrayed the republicans and established a dictatorship by cracking the whip on the republicans and ending the short-lived revolution in China. Thank you.